Hi guys, welcome to this session in Microsoft Excel. In this module, I want to show you how you can use the pivot by function. But first of all, I want to create a simple pivot table so we can compare the differences. So if I click at this table of data, go Insert, Pivot Table, it's picking up the actual table name. It's a formatted table, and I want the pivot table to go into cell F1. Click OK to that, and then what I will do is I'll put the names in the row and the region across the top in the columns, and then sales I will put into values. Gives me a pivot table, nice and neat, fairly straightforward. Now if I do the pivot by function, you can see the comparison there. So I'll just start at the top here. It's an array formula, so it's going to spill down. So equals pivot by. So I need the rows that I want. So I want the names to be in the rows, comma. Then the columns I want to be north and south, comma. And then I want to look at the sales, comma. And I need to, well, I don't need to, but I'm going to use the sum function. And for now, I'm just going to close the bracket on that and click the tick, and I get a similar looking thing. Just format that to pounds so you can see that there. So the difference is what happens when you change this data. With a pivot table, what you need to do is refresh the data, but what you don't need to do with pivot by function is refresh the data, automatically pick it up. So for example, I've got Anne here. If I just insert a row and I'll just pull that up so Anne can be in there again. You can see the figures already changing there, but if I change one of these to north and I'll put it to Anne, so I'll put north in there and I'll put that to Anne. So I've spelled Anne with an E where she hasn't got an E, so it sees that as a different person. So now it's filled that in automatically. So the pivot by function will automatically update. Whereas this one, I've got Anne there. It hasn't updated, and I need to refresh it for it to do that. So there you go. Now there are a lot of bangs and whistles with a pivot table that you don't get with pivot by. For example, I can insert a slicer for name, and then that will allow me to filter this data, and you can see it like so. Now what you can also do is create a slicer on a formatted table, which is this. So what I want to do, because at the minute I haven't got a slicer for this data, so if I just remove this filter for a minute so everything comes back, and I need to just move this table completely across to give myself a space, so I'll go across to there for now. What I want to do is add an extra column here, so I'll call it test, and that will become part of this formatted table. And in there I want to use the subtotal function, and I want to use the argument 103, which is count A, and I want to select a column, so if I press comma, that hasn't got any blanks in it, which is this name column. So what that's going to do, if I tick that, is just put ones all the way down there. Now I can create a slicer based on this because it is a formatted table. So if I go up there to table design, you can see you've got a slicer there. So this is independent of what you get on a pivot table. I'm going to get the same one, name, So this is a different one. So when I click this, it's looking at that, not the pivot table. So if I just bring that back, the reason that's disappeared is because this is collapsing. Now what I want to do with this one is cut this and put it onto a different sheet. So I'll just put it there. And I also want to cut this slicer, put that on a different sheet, like so. And then this one will affect this, but not at the moment, because all it's doing at the moment is filtering this table. What I have to do in my formula, if I bring that back, in this formula, the pivot by, I need to carry on and use the filter feature. So I'll press comma. It's just coming along the help here. I'm not interested in any of these. I'm just going to keep going until I get to the bit where it says filter, this one. So now I need to go down to my table and just select that column and then click the tick. Now if I click on Steve here, now this is getting filtered by this slicer. So wherever I click on in this, hold my control key down, so you click a couple, control key again, 3 people, you can see it's now working. If I get rid of that filter, everything comes back. So just a quick recap, a straightforward pivot table has the ability to have a slicer, and it will work, does work, which is great, but so does a formatted table. Formatted table also has the ability for a slicer. That means that when you use either the group by or pivot by functions on it, you can get it to filter using the slicer. So that's all I want to talk about in this little video, how you can use the pivot by function, attach it to a slicer, and get yourself what's almost as good as a pivot table. It doesn't replace pivot tables, but it's the fact it automatically updates is a big plus. No more refreshing data. So hopefully that was of use. I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for your time.